Emani Gabriella Moss was just a child, a young girl with dreams and a spirit yearning for love. But what she received instead was a childhood filled with nightmares. Starved to death by the very woman who was supposed to care for her. Emani's story is one of unimaginable suffering, a dark chapter that forced Georgia to confront the failings of its child welfare system. This is not the face of an innocent mother. This is the face of a monster who murdered an innocent, beautiful little girl. This monster's name is Tiffany Moss, sentenced to death by lethal injection. The only woman on death row in Georgia. Yup, great achievement. Born on April 23, 2003, Emani's life began with challenges. Her mother struggled with drug addiction, and by the time she was just a baby, Emani's father, Eman, gained sole custody, but life with her father would prove far from safe. He soon met Tiffany Moss, a preschool teacher who would later become Emani's stepmother and her tormentor. Emani's father, Eman, often worked long hours, leaving Emani alone with Tiffany. It was during these times that the abuse began. What started with bruises and harsh punishment would escalate into something far darker, a slow, deliberate starvation that would ultimately claim Emani's young life. At first, Emani's teachers noticed signs: bruises, scabs, and welts on her tiny arms, legs, and back. But in 2010, Emani's cries for help reached new heights when she confessed to a school nurse that she feared going home. She revealed that Tiffany had beaten her with a curtain rod, leaving her covered in marks and bruises. School officials reported the incident, leading to Tiffany's arrest and a charge of first-degree child cruelty. For most people, this arrest would be a wake-up call. But for Tiffany, it became a mark of resentment, a reason to direct more anger, more cruelty, toward Emani. Tragically, despite Emani's injuries and Tiffany's arrest, the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, or in short, GDFC-ES, dismissed the case after Tiffany completed a brief stint of parenting classes. And so, Emani was sent back into the arms of her abusers. By 2013, Tiffany had taken things to a deadly extreme. Emani, now 10 years old, had become a ghost within her own home. She was rarely allowed outside, hidden away and ignored. Family members would later recall that Tiffany had, for all intents and purposes, erased Emani from the world. The horrors in the Moss home escalated as Tiffany began systematically starving her stepdaughter. Weeks went by where Emani received almost no food. Her once bright eyes grew hollow, her cheeks sunken. But Tiffany ensured her own biological children were well fed, even sending Eman photos of the meals she prepared. As Emani lay in bed, too weak to move, she could smell the food from the other room. Just imagine being so hungry due to starvation and smelling food in the same home, unable to grab a bite of it. What would have gone through that poor little baby's mind? The last sense of life, comfort, and care she had was slowly slipping away, replaced by a never-ending hunger that gnawed at her very soul. Starved to the weight of a toddler, she became weaker each day. By October 24, 2013, Emani's frail body could no longer withstand the torment. In a final harrowing moment, she suffered what her father believed was a seizure. Instead of calling for help, Tiffany and Eman left her to endure this agony alone. Emani's cries and her suffering went unanswered. Days later, she passed away in silence on October 28. Eman found her body later that day. Yet even in death, Tiffany's cruelty persisted. She convinced Eman that they couldn't call the police because she would lose her children. Instead, they concocted a plan that would hide Emani's death in a grotesque cover-up. Emani's death was only the beginning of the horror. Tiffany, consumed by the fear of losing everything, convinced Eman to hide his daughter's body. They wrapped her fragile frame in blankets, placing her in a garbage can, dousing it with lighter fluid, and setting her remains ablaze. But the flames could not erase the traces of their crime. After the fire failed to consume her completely, they simply brought her back, stuffing her body into a trash bag to await discovery. Emani, racked with guilt and unable to keep their secret, finally made a desperate call to the police. At 4:00 a.m., he called, not to report Emani's death directly, but to admit he felt suicidal. Eventually, he confessed to the horror he had been part of, breaking the case open. In April 2019, Tiffany Moss stood trial, facing the full weight of her actions. Prosecutors presented a harrowing account of Emani's suffering. The world listened as the details of Emani's torture were read aloud, a suffering so intense, so incomprehensible, that the courtroom sat in silence. Tiffany, showing no remorse, represented herself at trial. When she was sentenced to death, there was no emotion, no hint of the horror she had inflicted upon an innocent life. Today, Tiffany remains Georgia's only woman on death row, imprisoned at Arundel State Prison, awaiting her fate. For Emani's family, and for those who fought for her, the story remains a haunting reminder. Her death led to reforms within Georgia's child welfare system, pushing for changes that might prevent future tragedies. But for Emani, change came too late. Emani's life ended at just 10 years old. She was a child who wanted love and safety, a child who instead found herself trapped in a nightmare. She deserves so much more than the cruel indifference she faced. And for us, her story is a reminder of what happens when those cries for help go unheard. The lawsuit underscores several incidents that the grandparents argue should have prompted DFCS to intervene more effectively. Prior records reveal that Emani was the subject of abuse investigations, with visible injuries and signs of malnourishment reported in multiple instances. Despite these warnings, DFCS returned her to her father and stepmother, citing insufficient evidence for more drastic measures. Robin and Samuel Moss contend that DFCS's failure to act decisively represents a systemic issue within the child protective system, as it did not enforce or ensure Emani's safety. Through this legal action, they seek justice for Emani and aim to bring greater accountability and reform to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The lawsuit serves as a call to action for better oversight, training, and responsiveness within child welfare agencies, stressing the importance of protecting vulnerable children in dangerous situations. The system created to bring safety and success to children should never, ever fail the same child it was created for in the first place. How do we know how many other children are neglected the same way? What kind of horrors are hand-waved today? I guess we may never know. This is Dark Matters. Thank you for joining us on this difficult journey through the life and tragic death of Emani Moss. If this story moved you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell as we continue to bring attention to stories that demand to be told.